I've officially completed 100% of Hogwarts Legacy. Well, sort of. More like 99.99, but we'll talk about that later on. But now I believe I am qualified to give my honest review of the game. It did everything it set out to do and gave players an overall great experience, but no games are without faults. So in this video, I will be discussing every aspect of the game while giving out the good and the bad, followed by my final verdict and rating of the game. The first thing I want to talk about is the overall story of Hogwarts Legacy. The story, in my opinion, does start off pretty strong, but as you continue through the game, there just seems to be more plot holes that really never got explained. Early on in my story, I seem to spend a lot more time in Hogwarts as well, which is really why I wanted this game. But as I got towards the end of my playthrough, a lot of my time was spent in the open world. One part particularly I didn't like about the story is how powerful our character got so quickly and how we went right into a world-ending disaster in our first year at Hogwarts. Obviously, we were a fifth-year student, but it was our first year there. I wouldn't have minded a little bit less serious of a situation, in my opinion, possibly building up to a sequel or building up over a couple games. Now, obviously, we don't have any confirmation if there would be a new game, so I understand why they maybe didn't want to go that route. Some of the random students or side missions were some of the most fun I had in this game as well, and I wish we got to spend more time exploring the relationships inside Hogwarts, having more story missions towards those. The house side characters had intriguing stories early on as well, but only Sebastian's story to me felt really compelling as I finished all of the individual storylines. I would have also liked to see some group stories, especially with students, as that's probably a little bit more realistic than every conversation or every story being a one on one. Now, I will say that the story itself was a really solid length. It wasn't too short, but it also wasn't too long where I felt like it dragged on forever. They were able to use a lot of the early story to catch us up to speed on the systems of the game. As I said before, our character was a fifth-year student coming in, but he was new to Hogwarts. Early on in our story, we used classes to learn a lot about the mechanics, but I do wish they used classes as a bigger part of our Hogwarts story, even after the story purposes, even if it was just used for a trophy or something of that sort. The combat in Hogwarts Legacy was done really well, as it gave you a lot of options on how you can approach battles and duels, while also giving you a challenge that felt rewarding if you did master using the different spell combinations. I will say early on it was a little clunky to get used to switching your spell pages back and forth to use all of the spells that you had, as you couldn't put all of them onto the sheets. But once I did master it and find out which ones I liked the most, the combat did become pretty second nature. Using the talent trees to upgrade the parts of your combat that you felt you liked the most gave a unique way to play the game as well. And you could change it for each of your playthroughs if you really wanted to, as there was a ton of different styles you could go with. And each enemy also had a unique type of combat style as well, the different spells they were weak to break their shields, which did force you to adjust your playstyle or combos on the fly if you wanted to be the most effective. But after a while, the enemies you fight got very repetitive and honestly a little boring over time, especially some of the ones I fought. Personally, I did enjoy fighting the wizards more than anything, as I do prefer more of the dual type of combat over things like fighting trolls or spiders. One thing I didn't like about the combat system is most of the enemies didn't get paired together. What I mean by that is a lot of times when you went into a dungeon and there were spiders, you would just fight like 500 spiders instead of throwing in a little bit more of a mix of everything at once. I think that would have made the combat a little bit more fresh and a little bit more interesting. The open world and the side content is honestly where I'm most torn, as it's probably some of the most fun aspects of this game and most rewarding, but also it had some of the most tedious and most broken parts of the game. In the intro, I did speak about the fact that I'm not technically 100% done, it's more like 99.99%, and that's because there is a butterfly quest that is legitimately broken right now, where you can actually catch other butterflies to complete the quest, But by doing so, it means you cannot get the last collection item as you didn't necessarily complete the right part of the quest. And then that means you can't get the trophy for the platinum. So hopefully that does get fixed in the future. I know Hogwarts Legacy has said they know about the fix, but theoretically, if it never does, that would mean another 30 to 50 hours of grinding for the platinum, doing a bunch of content that I don't want to do again, which honestly would be a total downer. Also, with the butterflies, sort of a random thing they decided to not do was put it on the region collection maps, as every other part of the game is trackable besides the butterflies. If you need to figure out which Merlin trials you haven't completed, which collection chests you haven't gotten, you can find all of that on those little maps in your top right for each region, but butterflies are not on there, which I think was an oversight. Now, another thing I had a problem with that you really wouldn't run into unless you are going for completionist is the galleon problem, which is your currency. I never really felt like I had a money problem just playing the game casually until I started going for that 100% collection log and I had to buy a bunch of super expensive broomsticks for 5,000 galleons, as well as other conjurations. And personally, I just would have liked for that to be a little bit less of a grind. It didn't take necessarily too much time, but what we had to do to grind the galleons was a little bit more of my problem. As farming animals to sell literally just turned us into poachers. We just ran around catching animals and selling them off for 120 galleons each, which I just personally was not a fan of. I guess you could also breed the actual animals inside of your room of requirement, which is a little bit better, but I would have liked a lot other ways to actually make money or just not necessarily need as much galleons. You could obviously sell items and armor that you get through the chest, which I did, but once I had already completed all the side quests, went through all the dungeons, and did all of that, I still needed a lot of galleons, and the only way I found that I could get them quickly was to do some poaching, basically. And I do think they missed an opportunity to make other things sellable in this game. Like, they could have made it able to sell potions or even just the supplies that we did get. I would have even liked if we could sell like the moonstones at a certain point. I know maybe don't make them a lot, but it just would have made it a lot less grindy and would have helped give us more options to make galleons that were a lot more interesting in my opinion. Honestly, I never used my potions for combat anyway, so I would have been down to sell them. Now, the Merlin trials were something that I felt like started really strong as well. It was even a main story mission. They kind of gave a backstory to what the Merlin trials were, and then they ended up being kind of useless, giving you fairly tedious rewards. All it did was just give us more gear slots, which means we didn't really have to go to Hogsmeade as much to sell gear. It didn't really matter all that much in the long run. Personally, I would have liked them to do a little bit more with the Merlin trials, especially because there were so many of them that late on in the game, I had pretty much done all of the ones I came across, and I still needed like 40 more, which was kind of crazy. I know that sounds pretty negative, but honestly, the overall field guide system is one of the best leveling and completion systems I've probably ever seen in a video game. That was one of the highlights for me, definitely, of the game, just the actual platinum trophy, the way they went about it. If you just play the game, you do all the story, you complete your field guide, which was, doing side content, you basically unlocked every single trophy you needed, as well as perfectly hit level 40. That's one thing I will definitely compliment Hogwarts Legacy on, is they didn't give us a ton of trophies that were grindy in a sense, as you just had to complete the game to 100%, and that gave you all the trophies. A lot of games, you have to not only do that, but then you have to do these side missions just for a trophy that is grindy, like, upgrade 100 pieces of armor, even though you only needed to upgrade 15 for your field guide or whatever the case is. A lot of games, you hit max level and then you have all this extra crap to do. I think they did a perfect job of tying in all of the collectibles and content together, so none of it was really a waste. I think there was a couple things that were a little bit more than you needed. Like I said, I think the Merlin trials, we needed a couple more than we needed in the field guide, and then same thing with the field guide pages, but they weren't really too bad overall. There could have been a lot worse, definitely. All other of the side content, like the collectible chests and bandit camps, were perfectly placed in my opinion. The balloons were another one, as there was not so many that you felt like it was a huge grind, but you could do that when you do come across it. But it also was not such a little amount that it might as well not existed. The character customization in this game was great as well in a lot of ways, but there was a couple ways it was also very underwhelming that I will discuss if you didn't use outside sources to take some of the quizzes. So the gear system itself was very easy to understand. You could always just equip and plug in new items to better your armor and your defense, and you really didn't have to spend too much time or really any time farming or grinding for better gear, especially if you did get your animals inside of your room of requirement and your vivariums. Then you can just get your upgrades through that, and it just basically all went together pretty smoothly, and being able to switch your style at any point was amazing. They did such a great job on the different things you could wear, like the robes and the gear you could wear. It looked super cool. The character customization was great, and I really felt like I made the wizard I truly wanted, even just creating my face and the voice and things like that. Now, the only part of the customization I didn't love was the house ceremony as well as the wand choosing. Now, if you weren't somebody who knew to take the more in-depth quizzes, or you just didn't want to do that outside the game, you didn't really have any great questions to see what you truly get is sorted into, which for me, I do feel like is a part of the process, right? When you go into Hogwarts, it's not always about just choosing your house or wand, but actually getting chosen into the house or your wand. So I would have never chosen to be a Ravenclaw by myself personally. I would have always chosen Gryffindor, but I was sorted into Ravenclaw once I took the quiz, and through that, I decided to represent Ravenclaw, and honestly, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, and going forward, I'll always be a Ravenclaw now. And same thing with my wand. I went into the quiz, got my wand, it told me that I had a phoenix feather, it told me the length of the wand, so that all got put into the game, which was great, but if you didn't have that, there really wasn't an extensive part in the game for that. As the house ceremony, it would have been just one question, and honestly, I don't think that was enough. Personally, I would have liked them to see them expand on it a little bit more. Overall, I will say it's a game worth buying and playing, but for me, I don't think it tickled all of what I wanted out of being a student at Hogwarts. Maybe in the future, they will give us a game more of what I was looking for, as I really wanted to spend not necessarily all 7 years as a student, but that's what my goal was, right? I wanted to come in and be in Hogwarts and be immersed in Hogwarts, the game where I truly spend time in Hogwarts. The story is surrounded by Hogwarts. Yeah, there's some open world, but I really wasn't expecting to play so much of the game outside of Hogwarts. Now, I know a lot of people are going to tell me to just go play a game like Sims and build my own Hogwarts if all I want to do is go to class. But for me, my Hogwarts dream was always being that student at Hogwarts. I really never cared about the parts of fighting trolls, going out into dungeons and fighting spiders. I didn't mind a little bit of it, but overall, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. But I will still give this game an 8.5 out of 10. By no means do I think it's a bad game. I still think it's a very good game. I just don't necessarily think it's a 10 out of 10. I think they missed the mark on a couple different features, in my opinion. But it's definitely a game I'm glad I played. Like I said, if I was to play through again, I'm just going to go hang out in Hogwarts. I'll play through some of the story, but honestly, I'm just going to talk to everyone in Hogwarts, literally go into every room in Hogwarts. That's all I necessarily really wanted to do. But please let me know your rating below. Let's try to keep it nice in the comments. I know people get pretty emotional about games they necessarily love or maybe they don't like, and we are all entitled to our own opinion. So, as always, if you guys did enjoy the content, subscribe if you are new here, and I will see you guys next time.